Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. Today we are continuing on with Codominance by CurlyStar09. We are reading chapters 7 and 8 today. Chapter 7 does have a warning for talks of infant neglect and abuse. Chapter 7, Late Night Tea. Bakugou didn't sleep much that night. Kirishima had taken the baby to sleep in his room, and after exchanging goodnights, Bakugou had made his way to his room. He used to have an office in the room they were turning into a nursery. Now he had his desk in one of the corners of his bedroom. It wasn't bad, and he honestly didn't mind, a small sacrifice to make room for Kirishima and the kid. Bakugou sat at his desk, going through the notes that Deku had sent him. Scans and files that had been recovered as the HC worked on finding even more. Everything was written in codes, most of it still encrypted, which meant he had to do it himself. It sucked, but at least he knew it was being done right. As far as he could see, Deku had sent him the reports on the process the villains had gone through to combine the DNAs of different heroes. It was a lot of science mumble that had little or no information for him to figure out where the villains could have run off to. He let out a sigh as he ran his hand through his hair with his eyes squeezed shut. Staring at the computer screen for so long was not helping the situation. Most of the information was only adding to the already found conclusion that these people were fucking insane. All to try to have the perfect villain or whatever the fuck they wanted out of this bullshit. Bakugou turned to look at the clock on his bedside table, announcing that it was close to 1 a.m., and he still had more than half of the files to get through. He cursed under his breath. He may as well continue. His parents, along with Kirishima's own, would be arriving around noon, and then their whole day would probably be shot. So Bakugou stretched his back for a bit, going back to work, decrypting the information as he tried to uncover something, anything, that could help them capture the bastards that had been trying to turn his kid into a weapon. He was able to decrypt a good amount of files when he heard his door open behind him, turning around to see Kirishima at the door, wearing a pair of basketball shorts he used for sleeping and a battered old t-shirt, and the baby in his arms as he fed him a bottle. "What are you doing up?" he asked with a yawn as he walked into the room. "Fuck, what time is it?" Bakugou asked as he turned around to him more fully. 4 a.m, Kirishima answered. "The little pebble woke me up. He needed a diaper change and a bottle." Kirishima explained. "Have you gotten any sleep?" "No, I have a lot of shit to look over," Bakugou grumbled as he ran his hand through his hair. "Bro, you look exhausted. You need some sleep," Kirishima said with a worried frown. "I'll be fine." Bakugou waved him away. "I'm trying to figure out where the bastards went. There are more of them out there, eh?" "And we will find them," Kirishima told him, "but it's not going to be helpful if you're half dead when that day comes." Bakugou snorted without humor. "I can handle one all-nighter." Kirishima looked at him for a second before letting out an annoyed sigh. The kid was done with his bottle, his eyes half closed as he fell back asleep. Kirishima held out the bottle to Bakugou. "Hold this for me real quick." Bakugou raised a brow but took the bottle before he could say a word. Kirishima's now free hand grabbed the back of the chair and started pulling it behind him with Bakugou still in it. "Oi, what the fuck are you doing?" "You wake up the baby and you will have the worst to worry about." Kirishima dragged him out of his bedroom. Bakugou huffed and cursed under his breath, making sure he wasn't being too loud as Kirishima took him towards the living room. The blonde tried to ignore the way his stomach was flipping at the realization of how easily Kirishima could manhandle him if he wanted to. So easily, without much effort. He tried to push the thoughts that were creeping into his mind down as Kirishima finally let go of the chair. "If I told you to go to bed, you would just wait for me to go back to my room and then you would go back to whatever you were doing," Kirishima huffed, sitting on the couch. He told Bakugou. "What the fuck? You aren't my— I will tell everyone about what happened at the hero ranking party 4 years ago if you don't listen to me right now. Let everyone find out what the number 2 hero is like when he's drunk," Kirishima threatened, his eyes hard as he glared at Bakugou. "We both know that everyone is just dying to interview either of us right now." Bakugou snapped his mouth closed and did as he was told, sitting on the sofa, arms crossed over his chest as he glared at the floor. No one needed to know how affectionate he got when he was drunk. "Here," Kirishima said, and he handed the baby over to Bakugou. "Don't move a muscle." Bakugou couldn't say one word as he watched Kirishima leave towards the kitchen, and he sat with the sleeping baby in his arms. He let out a frustrated sigh but didn't dare go against Kirishima. The bastard knew too much. Also, he would never admit it, but Kirishima was probably the only person he refused to upset. So Bakugou stayed where he was told. The kid was fast asleep, laying on Bakugou's chest without a care in the world. The sight made the corner of Bakugou's lips pull up slightly. A hand finds its way to the kid's back to rub small, soothing circles. The baby relaxed even more against him with a content sigh. Kirishima came back a couple minutes later with 2 mugs, extending one towards Bakugou. The blonde raised an eyebrow at the offer. "It's chamomile tea," Kirishima explained with an eye roll. "It will help you sleep." Bakugou took the mug, pretending to be displeased at the exchange. "Using the kid to make me stay put is low, to say the least," Bakugou said, instead trying to hold on to the annoyance and anger as he took a sip of his tea. Kirishima had put some ginger into his too. Shit, it was hard to be mad at someone who knew him so fucking well. "And threatening to spill your secrets is blackmail," Kirishima finished for him as he sat next to him. "Would you have done what I said if I hadn't have done either of those things?" "Yes," Bakugou's brain answered for him without hesitation. "I would do anything for you." "I was just trying to get some work done," Bakugou grumbled, instead hiding his face behind his mug. Kirishima let out a sigh, running a hand through his tangled long hair. "All right, fine, I'll bite. What was so interesting that you couldn't stop working on it? Or were you just too wrapped up in it to realize how tired you were?" Bakugou glared at the coffee table with a tisk, knowing he had no real answer. "Just got a lot to work through, shitty hair." Kirishima let himself sink even further into the sofa with a sigh. "You only call me that when you're annoyed or don't want to admit I have a point." "They had a lot of plans for what other trials they wanted to run," Bakugou explained, his voice just above a whisper. "How they could make quirks manifest faster, to know how useful the kid would be. That way they didn't have to waste time waiting for their quirks to manifest on their own." Kirishima took a deep breath. What were they doing, Katz?" They were going to try to stress him out, try to get his body to react, trying to defend himself, hoping that it would awaken his quirk," Bakugou explained, his hold on the kid tightening slightly. He didn't want to tell Kirishima that they were planning on starving him, keeping him awake for days, or even hurting him physically if necessary. The fact that the gremlin was underweight for his age already made him think that they were starting with that part of the disgusting plan. "We'll find them," Kirishima reassured him instead of asking more questions, getting closer to Bakugou until their arms touched. "Every single one of them." Bakugou could only nod. He was sure they would. Who else but them could get this done? They were unstoppable together, after all. Time passes. Kirishima tried to be as still as possible. Bakugou had fallen asleep on the sofa, leaning heavily against him as he held the baby to his chest. Kirishima had just been able to readjust his arm, wrapping it around Bakugou's shoulders, making it a bit less awkward of an angle for both of them. Kirishima's eyes were growing heavy as well as he rested his head on top of Bakugou's. He made sure the baby wouldn't fall if one of them moved, suddenly, by taking one of the smaller cushions, placing it in a way that would support the arm Bakugou was holding the baby with. He also threw the Afghan Bakugou had on the sofa over them. Once satisfied with the arrangement, Kirishima relaxed a bit more, letting himself bury his nose into Bakugou's hair for a bit. The smell of burned sugar made him smile as he waited for sleep to overtake him. This was dangerous. He should be putting the baby in his cot and making sure both of them got back into their beds, not cuddling with his best friend and the baby on the sofa. Ashido's text he had left unanswered coming to the forefront of his mind. She was going to kill him the first chance she got. He knew she was only trying to look out for him, but he didn't know how to explain what was going on to her. Their kid needed them to do this, and if it made his heart ache even more as he got a better glimpse at what he would never get, so be it. Bakugou let out a soft snore as he leaned into Kirishima's side a bit more, making the redhead take a sharp breath. He wasn't sure when it would happen, but he knew that they would have to go their separate ways again. Maybe once the kid was older, they would be able to co-parent without being under the same roof, as Ashido had told him. Or maybe Bakugou was just waiting for them to catch the villains to go back to his old life. Maybe that's why he stayed up most of the night trying to figure out where they were. His stomach twisted at the thought. Maybe Bakugou was the one being forced into all of this. Kirishima felt himself take a shaky breath at the thought. It wasn't true. He knew it wasn't true. Bakugou wouldn't do anything he didn't want to do. So Kirishima buried his nose a bit more into the blonde hair and pushed down the thoughts that were spiraling in his mind as he drifted into sleep, surrounded by the two people he was sure he loved the most. Tomorrow he would worry about everything else. Time passes. The baby woke up first, stretching against Bakugou's chest, kicking his feet slightly as he tried to roll over. Bakugou grumbled as he let out a yawn, looking down at the babbling baby on his chest who demanded to get the day started. Bakugou turned to his side and found Kirishima sleeping, his arm around Bakugou's shoulders and his head hung off the back of the sofa. Bakugou swallowed back the thought of just leaning over a couple of inches to brush his lips against Kirishima's cheek. Instead, he turned to the kid in his arm before whispering, "Be quiet, your dad is sleeping." He stood up with the kid, making sure to cover Kirishima with the Afghan as best he could with one hand. He turned to look at the clock. It was almost 9, which gave him enough time to get everything ready for when their parents arrived. The house was clean for the most part, but first, breakfast. He made his way to the kitchen, placing the kid on his high chair. "You stay there while I make breakfast. I think you can eat pancakes. Can you eat pancakes?" He would have to Google that. But for now, he started taking out everything he needed to make a bottle for the gremlin and pancakes for them. It was always calming for Bakugou when he was in the kitchen. Before long, he had batter cooking in one pan and bacon sizzling in another one while he cracked eggs into a bowl to make scrambled eggs. The kid babbled to himself as he played with his now empty bottle. "That smells good, Cats," Kirishima said as he walked into the kitchen, rubbing sleep out of his eyes. Bakugou hummed in reply, trying to focus on what he was doing. Meanwhile, the kid let out a shriek at seeing Kirishima. "Good morning to you too, Pebble," Kirishima told the kid with a bright smile before turning to Bakugou once more. "Do you need some help?" "Not really. Just make sure the place looks decent. If not, I'll never hear the fucking end of it from my mom," Bakugou said with an eye roll as he continued cooking. "You got it," he replied. "Also, kid's awake, so language." "You know he's going to hear those words sooner or later," Bakugou said with a groan. "Probably sooner with you around," Kirishima smirked before dodging out of the kitchen to do as he was told. Time passes. A couple of hours later, Kirishima and Bakugou were in the kitchen setting everything up for lunch. The baby was in his playpen in the living room in a spot where they could easily see him. Bakugou had put one of the CDs Eijirou had given them, so the house didn't feel too quiet as they rushed around. "So, we are telling our parents the whole truth?" Kirishima asked nervously. It seems like the right thing to do. How else are we going to explain that we kept a baby hidden from them for, 9 months of his life? I don't know about you, but I don't want to be fucking murdered," Bakugou told him as he finished setting up the table. "Fair enough," he scratched the back of his neck nervously. "My moms wouldn't be happy if they thought I had kept a whole relationship secret and had a child without saying anything. And those are your moms. Now what do you think the hag would do?" "Also easier to explain why he doesn't have a name yet," Kirishima pointed out. No matter what the hag says, we are not letting her name the gremlin, Bakugou warned with a glare. Kirishima laughed. All right, I promise. They finished getting everything ready just before the doorbell rang. Bakugou and Kirishima turned to look at each other, the same look they always shared before stepping into a fight crossing between them. Bakugou nodded and Kirishima bumped his fists together as a way to encourage them. Let's do this, Bakugou whispered. Kirishima went to pick up the baby and Bakugou waited for him. Somehow they both knew they had to open that door together, all three of them. The kid turned in Kirishima's arms and gave Bakugou a huge smile. Bakugou couldn't help but smile back. Come on, we can't keep them waiting. They walked to the door, Kirishima letting out a smoke breath as Bakugou reached for the doorknob. Two pro-heroes feeling terrified, and it wasn't even over some villain, it was simply over their parents. Bakugou opened the door, expecting to see either pair of their parents, but instead finding all four of them staring right at them. All eyes were pulled towards the baby as if he was a magnet. He is so precious, Kirishima's mom said, but no one said anything else. After some greetings, everyone ushered into the house, an awkward silence settling around them. Their parents sat on the sofa while Bakugou and Kirishima stood in front of them with the baby as they tried to find the words to explain what was going on in their lives. Okay, spit it out, brat. How long have you two been keeping this a secret? Mitsuki asked impatiently, gesturing at Bakugou and Kirishima. Bakugou fought the urge to roll his eyes. Instead, he just decided to be honest. About 5 days. He shrugged as all four parents stared at him in confusion. Eijirou, we are seriously asking. Rio, Kirishima's mom said with a sigh. It's true, Mom. Kirishima backed Bakugou with a nervous smile. There is a lot that we need to tell you about. Time passes. Maybe a cover story would have been a better idea than the truth. It took a while to get through the whole story, how they had found the kid and how they had figured out that technically they were his parents. And you, decided to just keep him? Mitsuki practically shrieked. Honey, calm down, Masaru told her as he reached out a hand for her. She pulled her hand away before glaring at her husband. He's not a pet. How in the world did you two think you could just... He had no one else, Bakugou told her, almost quiet, making Kirishima nervous. What were we supposed to do? Leave him and let the Hero Commission do whatever they wanted with him? You two are just so young, Rio said cautiously. You're both pros, and it just seems like a lot all at once. Tomoko put a hand on her wife's shoulder. It's very admirable, you two stepping up to raise the baby, but are you both sure you're ready for this? There is nothing to be ready for. We are already doing it, Bakugou told them. We know it's not going to be easy, but we're the only ones that should do this, Kirishima told them, taking a step closer to Bakugou, their arms brushing against each other. All right, then tell us, how long have you two been dating? Mitsuki asked, her eyes hyper-focused on how little space was between them. Bakugou hesitated, his mind stuck on the last words of his mother's question. They had agreed to tell the truth, but a part of Bakugou wanted to hold on to that lie, illusion, charade, whatever the fuck they were trying to create, even if it was out of selfishness. We aren't dating, Kirishima answered before Bakugou could decide. Wait, what about the pictures all over the news? Tomoko asked with a raised eyebrow. Trying to keep the kids safe, Bakugou answered, not wanting to go into detail. Kirishima next to him just nodded as if trying not to get any more questions about it, and for some reason it made Bakugou's heart ache. So, what's my grandkid's name? Masaru decided to break the silence and change the subject. Bakugou let out a sigh full of annoyance. So, he may not have a name just yet. Time passes. The rest of lunch went without a hitch. That is, without the endless suggestions from their parents for names and unsolicited advice about raising a kid. Bakugou was drained by the time their parents left, promising to keep what they had learned a secret. Bakugou laid on the couch, ignoring the mess he had to clean in the kitchen while Kirishima put the kid in his cot. The kid had passed out, tired from all the fussing and attention from his 3 grandmothers and 1 grandfather. Fuck, they were going to try to visit all the time now, weren't they? It hadn't been that bad. If he was honest with himself, it had been nice. The kid deserved being surrounded by love, and Bakugou would be lying if he said he hadn't seen exactly that today. His mother had even pulled him aside for a moment and told him that she was proud of him. Proud of him. Kirishima walked back into the room, a smile on his face as he went to sit on the floor next to Bakugou's head, placing the baby monitor on the table. You all right? Bakugou let out a groan that wasn't anything other than a sigh of relief. I know you said you didn't want your mom naming the baby, Kirishima started. She said we should name him Yuji, eh? Bakugou huffed. I know, the redhead told him as he tried to suppress a laugh. That means second. My kid is second to no one, Bakugou grumbled, crossing his arms over his chest as he glared at the ceiling. Did I say I liked the name she picked? Kirishima let out a small laugh. Bakugou turned to look at Kirishima then, suddenly realizing how close his best friend was to him. If Kirishima turned a bit more, he would be just inches away from his best friend's lips. Bakugou felt the heat rise in his cheeks, so he turned towards the ceiling once more, trying to push it down. He did it just in time because Kirishima twisted to look around at him just a second later. You don't have to like it, Kirishima started nervously. It just came to me while our parents were suggesting names. What's the name? Kirishima let out a breath, a small smile on his lips. Akio. Chapter 8, Bakugou's Son. Their second year in UA, Bakugou realized that Kirishima was his son, shiny and bright, a warm presence when he needed it the most. Always there, making his days clearer. He didn't understand why it took him so long to realize that he actively looked towards Kirishima when he needed someone. He was never one to ask for help, much less accept it when it was offered, even less being around people in general. Yet, with Kirishima, it was so easy. Everything was so easy when it was with Kirishima. So much so that it scared him to his core in a way he couldn't put into words. So during their second year at UA, Bakugou realized that Kirishima was his son, and he decided to hide from Kirishima. It was easier to avoid someone when they were both busy. Internships, training, and classes taking up most of their time, making it hard to have more than a few minutes to spare, even rarer to be alone together. A part of Bakugou told him that he had to get used to being without Kirishima. It was only a matter of time before Kirishima realized that he was wasting his time hanging around with Bakugou. Or worse, Kirishima would see right through him and see all the feelings fluttering inside him, and then Bakugou would lose his son forever. The hardest part was how dark his days felt without Kirishima. Even though he had purposely changed a few things on his schedule so he would have the least amount of days off that matched up with Kirishima's own, it was as if there was no reason to even have a day off at all without the redhead around. Bakugou needed to be around that bright smile and carefree attitude to recharge, to feel whole once again. He knew Kirishima had his dark days. They all did. After everything they had seen and been through, it would have been worrisome if he didn't. He kept that in mind, keeping an eye on his best friend in order to be ready if he needed to step in to help. It was just, he needed to get used to being without Kirishima, because the day Kirishima wasn't by his side anymore, he wouldn't be able to have that warmth and comfort ever again. It was just a matter of time before Kirishima found someone he liked, and Bakugou would just watch. It was just a matter of time until Kirishima got tired of his bullshit, and then he would be alone again. That was the plan he followed for months, and even though it was hard, he was able to keep his distance. No matter how much it ached to not be around Kirishima, Bakugou needed to learn how to be without him. There was a lot he had gotten used to, and he needed to break those habits. He found it almost impossible to study without the redhead next to him mumbling to himself and tearing his pencil apart by biting on the end of it. Learning how to train alone once more instead of having Kirishima to spar with, he needed to relearn how to be on his own. That was the plan, and he needed to be ready for when it happened. Everything went to shit with one phone call. It was a Tuesday night. Bakugou was already in bed when his phone started vibrating. He picked it up, with every intention to swear and curse at the person on the other side for calling so late, but he stopped short when he heard Fat Gum's voice. His blood turned cold as he listened to the pro explain, Red Riot, Kirishima got hurt during patrol, villain ambush, he's in surgery right now, and it looks bad. Bakugou didn't wait for any more info. His heartbeat was loud in his ears as he threw on some clothes and rushed out of his dorm room. The whole way to the hospital, he tried to remember the last time he'd seen Kirishima, the last conversation they'd had, and he could think of nothing. It had been a long time since he spent more than a couple minutes with his friend, and now Bakugou felt the tears filling his eyes as he thought that he would never get to see Kirishima smile ever again. Never hear him laugh or complain about math, or the list was so long and never ending. He had been preparing for Kirishima to leave him, but not like this. Never like this. He arrived at the hospital in record time. Fat Gum greeted him with a sad smile. He'll be glad to know you're here. The words were a dagger to Bakugou's heart that was breaking with every second without knowing anything about Kirishima's condition. What happened? What the fuck happened? Was all Bakugou could say, trying to understand how his best friend ended up in the hospital. There was a villain attack, nothing out of the ordinary, just that their quirk was out of control, some type of trigger drug, and a lot of destruction followed. Fat Gum ran a hand across his face in frustration. A building came down on him. He was getting people out, and he went back in to make sure no one was left. Why would you let him go in? Why the fuck did he go in? Bakugou screamed. The thought of a whole building falling on Kirishima making him panic, not caring about the stares he was getting. Fat Gum shook his head. I couldn't have stopped him if I tried. The words made Bakugou freeze. He knew that Fat Gum was right. Kirishima would have gone in to make sure no one was left behind, no matter what anyone said or did to try to stop him. So Bakugou waited nervously with Fat Gum in the waiting room as the minutes ticked by, and he could do nothing but regret the time he had spent trying to avoid his best friend. He still isn't sure how long he sat there waiting, and the whole night was a blur in his memories. He remembers a doctor approaching them. The relief that watched over him when they were told Kirishima was out of danger. Running down a hallway without giving a shit because he needed to see him. He needed to see that red hair, that pointy teeth smile, those red eyes, and just, he needed to see his best friend, be near him, hear his beating heart, and the raising of his chest. He had walked into the room and found Kirishima asleep in the hospital bed, a machine next to him beeping steadily, marking his heartbeat, letting Bakugou know that it was still beating, making the blonde tear up once more as the fear that had been gripping his heart released him. He almost fell to his knees at the sight, but he needed to get closer. He walked over to his best friend, a hand finding a bandaged hand with a light touch, terrified of hurting the redhead. I'm sorry, Bakugou whispered. I'm so sorry. His tears spilled as he stood there next to his best friend, the boy he loved, and all he could do was apologize. For pushing him away, for not being there to help, for not having his back when he needed him the most. He apologized for a lot of things that night while his best friend was still out on anesthesia from the operation. Bakugou was pretty sure he passed out, exhaustion finally winning while he was still filling the room with his apologies. When he woke up the next day, the first thing he saw was Kirishima's bright smile and Bakugou knew that from that moment on he would do his best to always have his son next to him, even if it meant just being his friend and having to push down every feeling in his chest. Time passes. Akio, Bakugou echoed, tasting the name on his tongue. Yeah, Kirishima said with a shrug. It seems fitting, don't you think? Bakugou stared at the ceiling. He could feel his heart swelling as the thought formed in his mind, and he couldn't shake it off. He had 2 sons now, clear and bright, one of which needed him in a way he never thought someone would. I like it, Bakugou said before adding just above a whisper, Kirishima Akio. Kirishima made a choky noise. What? You want him to have my last name? Yeah. Is that a problem? Bakugou asked, feeling self-conscious. They hadn't discussed what last name the kid should have. He just assumed. No, just I like the sound of Bakugou, Akio, Kirishima answered with a nervous laugh. Bakugou sat up, looking at Kirishima with a frown. The fuck? Are you insane? Kirishima Akio works better. You know that if we give the kid my last name, everyone is going to think that you're going to take my last name as well, right? Kirishima challenged. People are already assuming that we're married. That means we would have the same last name, isn't it? Bakugou's mouth went dry at the idea. He opened his mouth and closed it as he tried to make his brain work for once. So fucking what? Fuck what people think, he muttered. Kirishima got up from the floor, stretching his arms over his head with a sigh. We can argue over last names tomorrow, but just to double check, our kid's name is Akio? Kirishima asked brightly. Bakugou couldn't help but grin as he stood up as well. Yeah, Akio it is. Time passes. Hero Humor Support Chat. Only cool kids. Rock. We have an announcement. Taser. Bakugou finally learned how to stop being a grump. Boom. Get over here and find out, dunce face. Sticky. He will never learn. Vinegar. What is the announcement? Hands. Also, when were you guys going to tell us you were dating? Hypno. Oh, this is going to be good. Rock. We aren't dating. It's... A lot is going on right now. Steel. So you two don't have a kid together? Taser. Popcorn emoji. Ears. Share the popcorn, Dinky. Rock. We can explain that later. Steel. Bro. Aren't we bros anymore? Sticky. Crying emoji. The bromance is dead. Taser. Oh, the bromanity. Taser. Get it? Like, oh, the humanity? Hypno. And here we thought bros were forever. Boom. For fuck's sakes, you assholes don't know when to fucking stop. Boom. Sent a picture of Akio smiling brightly, his hair in disarray. Boom. Meet Kirishima Akio. Vinegar. OMG. Ears. That is such a good name. Hands. Look at him. He is so precious. Sticky. No murder in the name? Confused emoji. Hypno. That's a bit of a letdown. Steel. Look at the little bro. Rock. You need to come and meet him in person, bro. Steel. Sure will. Boom. That was all we wanted to say. Now fuck off. Taser. Oh, come on. Why did you send this to the group chat then? Time passes. Kirishima let out a sigh. The group chat was still going crazy, but he ignored it. He sent some messages to Tetsu explaining the situation. Not a lot of detail, but just enough to clarify a few things until they had time to get together and talk. That wasn't what was worrying him. Ashido was still blowing up his phone, and the more he ignored it, the more she was going out of her way, the more she was going to blow when he finally answered. Kirishima took a breath. Bakugou had gone out to the store to buy some things they needed for lunch, and Akio was taking a nap. He had no excuse not to call her. The phone rang twice before Ashido picked up the phone, her voice almost cold. "Oh, you can make time to talk to me now? This is a good time? If not, you can go back to ignoring me." "Mina, I'm sorry. It's just..." Kirishima tried to explain, but he had no excuse for leaving her on red. "It's fine, Kiri, but what happened to knowing where you stand? You told me you were going to keep it platonic, and then the next day I see a picture of you kissing the guy you have been in love with for 10 years. 7 years, Kirishima corrected. Don't pull that BS with me, because I know you were crushing on Bakugou during our first year, at least, and that's me being nice. Who organizes a rescue for someone they don't have feelings for? But whatever," she told him with a small huff. "Also, how does that make it any better? We had to do it, Mina. How else could we explain the fact that we have a baby together? Later on, we can just pretend to break up or something. We just need this to work for now," Kirishima explained in a rush. "What about you, Kiri? Are you sure this is the best thing for you?" Ashido asked, her voice full of concern now. "It's not about me, Mina. It's about Akio. He needs us to do this, and I'm not going to run away just because I can't get over my feelings for my best friend." The line went silent as the weight of Kirishima's words settled over them both. "You need to talk to him about this. All of it," Ashido told him. "You're going to end up getting hurt, and I know that's the last thing Bakugou would want out of this." "I don't want to risk losing him," Kirishima answered, his voice breaking on the words. "We've had so many close calls already, being pro-heroes, and Kirishima, those are just excuses, and you've told them all to me before," Ashido said softly. "If you really want to get over Bakugou, you need to tell him how you feel. Once that's out in the open, you two can go from there." Kirishima let out a breath, closing his eyes at the thought of confessing to Bakugou. "I can't. Just think about it, all right?" "Yeah, I'll do that." Time passes. Bakugou let out a sigh. "Ow, move, you stupid little fucker." Alberto stared at Bakugou. He was laying right in the middle of Akio's cot, staring up at him as if offended. The little fuck refused to let Bakugou put the kid down for the night, and Kirishima wasn't being helpful. "You know, if we had built the crib as soon as it arrived today," Kirishima chuckled, cutting himself short as he turned to glare at him. The fact that we still need to finish painting means jack shit to you?" Bakugou told him. "Move Al off of the cot." "Nope, not doing that. He scratches," Kirishima told him as he took a step back. Bakugou looked at Kirishima in utter disbelief. Don't you have a quirk that makes it impossible to get hurt by fucking bullets?" Akio started crying then, startled by Bakugou's booming voice. "Oh shit, sorry, Akio." Bakugou apologized and held him closer to his chest. "It's all right, everything is okay," Kirishima added, stepping closer, a hand wiping the baby's tears away. He looked up at Bakugou, his breath hitching as he noticed only a couple inches between them. Bakugou's eyes were on his not even a second later, but Akio's crying broke whatever spell seemed to have locked them in place for that split second. "What do we do?" Kirishima asked, turning to look around the room for something to soothe the baby. "I don't know. We just fed him, and he has a clean diaper. I scared him. I don't know what the fuck we have to do." Bakugou's words rushed out in a panic. "Cats, breathe," Kirishima told him, hands on his best friend's shoulder. "We just need to think. What helped you calm down when you were a kid?" Bakugou looked at Kirishima, blinking twice before his eyes dropped down to Akio, who was still crying his little heart out. I think I have an idea," he said as he sat on the bed, repositioning Akio so it was like he was half sitting in his lap. Kirishima sat next to him, waiting patiently as Bakugou hushed the baby softly. The redhead smiled as Akio's little hand tightened around Bakugou's t-shirt, his wide eyes looking at both of them. "A story should help, right?" Bakugo said as he looked at Kirishima, who just looked at him with curiosity. My dad used to tell me stories before bed. It helped me sleep. That's manly, Kirishima said with a smile. So, Little Red Riding Hood and such? I have a better idea, Bakugo said with a hint of a grin. Akio had calmed down a bit, whimpering instead of outright crying, turning his face to hide against Bakugo's chest. Hey, little pebble, it's all right, Kirishima told him. Do you want to hear a story? Bakugo asked Akio as he rubbed away a trail of tears with his thumb. This is a story about how your dad and I kicked some villain butt back when we were in high school. Cats, Kirishima said with a slight chuckle. What is your plan here? Bakugo just shrugged. Kid has to learn. He has the best dads around sooner or later. Bakugo started his story telling Akio one of their first missions together. It hadn't been anything big, just a robbery during a patrol. The villains hadn't put up much of a fight from what Kirishima remembered, yet the way Bakugo had told the story, it seemed completely different. Akio listened wide-eyed, as if hanging on every word. Bakugo went into detail about the fight and explained techniques that Kirishima was sure the kid didn't need to know, but he said nothing. He was also engrossed in the story. In hearing Bakugo's rough voice speak so softly, it felt weird hearing about their mission like this, made into bedtime stories for their kid, and it was working. As Bakugo kept talking, Akio's eyes grew heavy until finally they fluttered shut, his breathing evening out. Bakugo gave Kirishima a wild grin, his eyes full of pride, whispering, "He's asleep." I can see that, Kirishima whispered. Let's put him in his cot now so that we can get some rest too. Bakugo nodded carefully, standing up. Akio readjusting himself in his arms with a small sigh. As he got close to the cot, he remembered how it all started. Al was still laying in the cot, looking as peaceful as he could be. Bakugo let out a groan. Move the damn cat, eh? Kirishima let out a laugh before quieting himself after getting a glare from Bakugo. A warm feeling settled around his heart as he moved Al out of the cot, making sure to take the top blanket out so that Akio wouldn't sleep on top of cat hair. Bakugo placed Akio in, a soft smile on his face as he patted the baby's hair down a bit. Good night, Akio, he whispered. Kirishima couldn't help but smile, one of his arms wrapping around Bakugo's shoulders to pull him close. Thanks for doing this with me, he told the blonde, and he meant every word. No matter how much it was going to hurt when this all ended, he was glad that he got to see this side of Bakugo. Bakugo leaned against him slightly, and Kirishima just hoped he couldn't hear the way his heart was beating. Nothing to thank me for. Can't imagine missing out on this. Bakugo gestured to Akio. They stayed that way for a while, neither of them moving as they watched their kid sleep. Bakugo couldn't help but feel that this could be more, so much more, if he just turned around and admitted what he had been hiding for years. Well, good night, Kirishima told him, pulling away from Bakugo. I'll see you in the morning. Gotta finish that nursery. He finished by pumping his fists together with a crooked smile before he started making his way out. Yeah, Bakugo responded as he watched Kirishima walk away. Good night. The moment was gone. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to calm his nerves. Maybe it was better if he just stayed quiet. All right, friends, thank you so much for joining me for this next piece. The next part will be chapters 9 and 10, and I hope that you will come back to hear that next piece.